Welcome everyone. As we kick off, I'm just waiting for the number of attendees to reach its equilibrium point, its stable point, and then we'll kick off. Very good. Welcome to the Anglo-Hellenic League's first webinar of 2022. This event is a joint production with the Friends of Mount Athos. It's a great pleasure to be collaborating with them. It's the first time we've done a joint event with the Friends for several years. My name is John Kittmer. I am the chair of the League. I'm joined here tonight by Chris Thomas and Peter Desmond from the Friends. I'll introduce them shortly. Welcome to both of them. Let me just stop my screen share so you get to see us at least temporarily. Both the League and the Friends are charities. I want to say just a little bit about our mission. The League was founded in 1913 and it exists to promote friendship and understanding between Britons and Greeks. We have two main types of activity. We run a cultural program of which this is a good example. And we raise money for social and educational causes in Greece and the UK. The Friends of Mount Athos, formed a little more recently in 1990, are dedicated to supporting the well-being of the monasteries of Mount Athos and aiding those making pilgrimages there. The Friends undertake a very wide range of activities, including conferences, charitable fundraising, publications, and, as we're going to hear tonight, hard physical work to make and keep the paths of the Holy Mountain accessible to pilgrims traveling on foot. Like every other charity in the UK, our programs continue to be disrupted by the pandemic. We're all of us hopeful that this year we'll be able to see a more confident and more stable return to meetings held in person, and an end to having to revise pretty constantly and reschedule our cultural program. But we are going to continue to take advantages of the possibilities for global outreach through webinar events like this one. You can find out more about our two programs, the Leagues and the Society of Friends of Mount Athos's programs, on our website, and I'm going to point you to them at the very end of the evening's event. Wherever you're watching us from, you are very welcome, particularly if this is your first participation in a League or Friends event. Tonight, our speakers have agreed to take your questions at the end of their talk. You can find on your screen a button, Q&A. You click on it and type your questions in. I'll draw on your questions when we get to the group discussion at the end of the talk. For this evening, in order just to keep things simple and to help you concentrate on the talk in front of you, we've disabled the chat and the hands up buttons. So your only way to communicate with us is through the Q&A button. Right, let me introduce our speakers tonight, Chris Thomas and Peter Desmond. Chris is a seasoned path clearer who ran the Friends Path Clearing Programme for many years. He's now Vice Chairman of the Society and co-author of a book I'm pretty sure he's going to introduce you to this evening, Encounters on the Holy Mountain. Peter has recently taken over from Chris as the head of the Path Clearing Programme at the Friends. He's on the Society's Executive Committee and is doing a PhD on contemporary iconography that's being painted on Mount Athos now. Both Chris and Peter are seasoned walkers, path clearers and pilgrims on the Holy Mountain. All of us who've had the privilege of traveling and worshipping there, or who perhaps have seen the monasteries in skites from the tourist ships that circumnavigate the peninsula, know that it's a really special place, spiritually, environmentally, and culturally. So it's a huge pleasure to have Chris and Peter here tonight to share their rich experiences of walking adventures on the Holy Mountain. Gentlemen, the floor is yours.
Good evening, everybody. It's a real pleasure to be here. I just want to make sure that everybody can see our presentation. I want to tell you that our presentation does not have any slides. It simply has pictures and the occasional map. And just bear with me while I make sure my technology works. Mount Athos is a place that many people have heard of. Quite a few people know a little bit about, and I think most people know nothing about. It is called the Holy Mountain. We call it the Holy Mountain. That's a direct translation of Aios Oros, the name that it's referred to in Greek. People who live there refer to it as the Garden of the Mother of God. And I think if you ever go there, or if you see pictures of it, as you can see here, it really is the most beautiful place. I'm afraid I'm going to use that word beautiful a few times this evening, but it's very difficult to talk about Mount Athos without referring to its physical beauty. And of course, it's beautiful in lots of other ways, but it really is the Garden of the Mother of God. Some people actually they refer to it as an island, and it's not an island, as you see in a minute, but I'll explain to you why sometimes people refer to it as such. On this map, you'll see that it's actually a peninsula. It's the northernmost of three peninsulas that comes out from Chalkidiki on the north, in the north of Greece, quite near Thessaloniki. And the reason it's referred to as an island sometimes is because you could only really travel there by ferry. And apart from the fact that, apart from that, it's also such an extraordinary place that it feels otherworldly. So you're looking at Mount Athos now, and to put it into perspective, it's approximately 50 kilometers long. It's 6 to 8 kilometers across, depending on where you are looking. And in terms of area, it's about 330 square kilometers, which I know doesn't necessarily mean an awful lot to people. It's roughly speaking the size of the Isle of Wight. So it's a significant piece of land. It's not just in terms of the distances and the size, but it's also topographically, it's a very, very mountainous piece of land. This map does a fairly good job of explaining that, showing it. I would say that you would struggle to place a cricket pitch anywhere on the Holy Mountain, with the exception of the areas that have been flattened by man for reasons of agriculture or building. So it's a very, very mountainous piece of land. It's occupied by approximately 2,500 people, of whom 2,000, just under, are monks. The others are administrative staff, policemen, workers, constructors, whatever. And pretty much everybody lives in the 20 monasteries that you can see on this map. There are in fact 22 places here marked on this map within Mount Athos. One in the middle is Carius, which is the small town that essentially serves as the capital, and a little bit below it is Daphne, which is essentially the main port at which the ferries stop. Although of course they stop in a number of other places. The other 20 are all monasteries, and they are They have a pecking order. There is a lead monastery and there is a number 20, but they are also divided a little bit in terms of the nationality or the principal nationality of occupants. So there are 17 Greek monasteries. There is one Russian monastery, one Serbian monastery, and one Bulgarian monastery. What I've just done is added the footpaths of the Holy Mountain, and you will see that what this brings to life a little bit is how dominant the southern 3/4 of the peninsula are in terms of occupation. The area at the top here is essentially not occupied. There are 1 or 2 cells, individual dwellings in which an individual monk may live, but essentially that area is referred to by people who know the peninsula as a desert, and it is a desert in the sense that it has a kind of strange landscape. It's a bit like moorland. There are not very many trees. The only exception is this piece of land here just next to Uranoupoli, so very near the border with Greece proper. And that area is the part of Mount Athos that grows grapes commercially. So that's the wine area of Mount Athos. If you occasionally might have come across a wine from Mount Athos in a Greek restaurant that you might have visited, that's probably where it will have come from. The monasteries themselves do have vineyards, and we'll come back to monasteries and their vineyards later in the talk. But essentially that wine tends to be for their own use and for maybe selling in their shops for the monasteries that do have a shop. The serious stuff is as I say, in this area here. This last map shows the relatively modest impact we think we've made over the years. These are essentially the footpaths that we have walked, cleared, signposted, and described over the period of the last 18 years since our activity started, our path clearing activities started in 2004. And we're obviously very proud of the work that we've done. We think that we've cleared cumulatively about 2,000 kilometers of footpaths. Now, of course, there aren't 2,000 kilometers. We estimate there are approximately 300 kilometers in total, but obviously we've cleared bits of footpath over and over again. And over the 18 years that we've been running our activity, we've had close to 250, we call ourselves footpath warriors, but 250 of us in total have contributed to the clearing of the footpaths. In this photo, you can see the two people that inspired us to do this. The gentleman in the foreground, His Royal Highness. We heard today actually that he has contracted COVID, so we wish him a very speedy recovery. But it was his idea. He suggested that it would be good for the Holy Mountain if we could maintain the paths. And he doesn't need much of an introduction, of course, but he does need our thanks, because he didn't just have the good idea, he has also been there for us for the past 18 years, always supporting and always encouraging the work that we do. The person in the background in the center, John Arnell, perhaps does need a bit more of an introduction. It's really his energy, his cleverness, his perseverance, his personality that has really made what we do come to life, because it's him that essentially organized, led, and inspired the first 6, 7, 8, 9, I'm not really sure of the number, pilgrimages to the Holy Mountain. But it all started with this visit in 2004. And as you can see, it was a real visit with real work being done. So thank you to those two gentlemen. Their work means that we are taken relatively seriously in this place these days. This place is the Iera Epistasia, which means the holy administration, essentially the seat of government for Mount Athos. Each of the 20 monasteries has a representative here, and among other things that they do to support us, they do something very, very important, which is that each time we visit, they issue us with one of these, I'm going to use the word beautiful pieces of paper, but this has to be the best visa ever. I think it's worth going to the Holy Mountain just for this. It's essentially the permission to visit the Holy Mountain. In our case, we also have permission to work and to stay typically longer than the four standard, the 4 days that is standard for most pilgrims. So having given you a bit of context, I think I'm going to pass you over to Peter. Peter's going to take us on a real journey, and I'm just going to finish off at the end with a few words. Peter, over to you.
Thanks very much, Chris. This photo was taken a few years ago, and it contains a lot of path clearing legends, as we would call them. This is where people are gathered before getting onto the ferry on the Sunday morning. Just a brief word about what happens before that. All of the path clearers tend to gather in Thessaloniki and come down by coach to Ouranopolis. There we have our last night in a very smart-ish hotel with a comfortable bed and a nice meal. And we do some housekeeping work. We allocate teams, we appoint team leaders, and we make sure that we know who's going where. And we are ready here pretty much to embark, albeit relaxing with a nice coffee. The legend, the path clearing legend, I think, is John Arnell. He's clearly asking somebody here, I imagine, to pay the bill for all those coffees. And somebody just there is writing a check with a pen. It's a nice little place, and we always gather there, and we get the 10:15 ferry from Ouranopolis. This is our first view as we head off down the coast, and it's a well-known landmark, Byzantine tower, that Joyce Locke used to inhabit back in the day, and it's a very beautiful little view back towards the hills. And once you're on the boat, that's it. You know that you're on your way. This was a little video I took, but I think we've taken it as a still, where a young boy holds out a piece of bread and a seagull catches it. I thought it was rather nice. The other thing that's very distinctive, which I'll come back to in a minute, this is a group of path clearers looking very happy. And the reason they're looking very happy is because this is the after shot rather than the before. This is on our way home, and they look composed and happy and content, and the job is done, and they're looking forward to perhaps a glass of beer at the hotel in Thessaloniki. This, on the other hand, is us on the way out. There's a slight nervous energy. Some people are thinking, this is my first time. What have I let myself in for? What am I going to do? There's a few little bits and bobs that need to be done in terms of allocating tasks. And also there's a few people who need to get off the boat before it gets to Daphne. So there's 2 or 3 stopping off points where teams who are going to Zagrafou, Constantinitou, and Hilandar need to be ready and primed to get off the ferry. And it doesn't stop for very long. It's quite a rapid thing. This is us trying to sort out tools on the helipad, much to the amusement of the non-path clearers in the background, who I think are probably having a bit of fun at our expense. I hope they are anyway. We're just doing that last bit, and they are issued to the team so that they've got everything they need as they go on to the monasteries. This is one of the most breathtaking moments, really, of the journey, is when you first kind of picture and can actually see the Holy Mountain in full glory. It really is. It's a moving moment, even if you've done it several times. So as we progress down the coast, we arrive at Daphne, which is the main port of Mount Athos, around about 11:45. And as you can see, people here are on the boat queuing up to disembark. If you look a little bit further forward, you can see there's people who are ready to get onto the ferry to go back to Oranopolis. And amongst them is a few customs people. They really tend to ignore us on the way in, and they just check a few bags on the way out. But it's a very bustly place as the ferries come in. And as you can see here, there's lorries and all sorts of stuff that gets transported into and out of the Holy Mountain. But this is where people are putting their feet on Mount Athos for the first time. And it really is, it's quite a moment. And following that is getting the coach. But just to recap, the line along the south is the journey that we've taken from Moronopoli, stopping off at a couple of points here at Zographou and Kostamonitou to let the teams go off there. We stop off at other places, but we generally don't have teams in Dokiariou or Xenophontos or Pantalimenos, at least not straight away. We have been to those places, and then we arrive at Daphne. Just further down are the southwestern monasteries of Simonos Petros, Grigorio, Dionysio, and Pavlou. We tend to visit them in the second week, so there's not much to say about those for the moment. And we get, there is an alternative route going from Yerissos on a speedboat along the northern coast. A number of things to say about that. We don't use that for the whole team, but we do use it occasionally as needed. It has a smaller speedboat. It's on the prevailing windward side of Mount Athos, so the wind and the sea is less predictable, and often there are cancellations of boats going up and down there. So if anybody here does go that way or is interested in going to Athos via that way, it's always wise to check with the ferry company that operates on the northern side before you go, in order to make sure that the ferries are going that day. But it's quite a fun trip going down there. This is the mighty capital, the bustling heart of Mount Athos, which is FRGS. And here you'll see lots of people milling about. Everybody here pretty much is waiting for a minibus to take them either back down to Daphne if they're leaving, or onwards, in our case, to our individual monasteries. So we'll have teams of about 4 people, maybe 5, sometimes 3, and they are going off for the first week to their individual monasteries. A bit of luxury transport occasionally, such as this army truck, will ferry you around. Inside them, there are luxury park benches, and quite often you get some friendly Eastern European types who are very keen to share with you their granduncle's raki or something, which is often very friendly, but you know, it's at your own risk, I think, that you take it. It's quite fun though. This is the first view often of Zographou that we get if you happen to be going there. But I put this here as an example. It's quite an imposing sight when you first arrive. On the right-hand side is the monastery proper. On the left-hand side is the accommodation block, which has been built in the past 7 or so years. It's much improved on what was previously. This was my first room when I arrived at Vatopedi. The moral of the story is, when you arrive, you go to the Archondoriki and you get various things checked and various formalities done. They give you some sipura, some lukumi, and then they take you to your room. The moral of my story is I dithered around rather a lot, and consequently got the bed in the middle here, which was the worst one of the room, because I had 2 people, I had a person either side of me. I didn't have any storage space on the window, and I didn't have any breeze in the evening. Even so, it was great fun, and it's, how should we say, character building. Second week was in this room in Zographou, where I met Chris for the first time, which was great joy. And this looks quite spacious on the right-hand side, but within minutes, it had filled up with bags, with bits of food, with debris, with bits of clothing. And it was almost impossible to get in and out of during the night, especially if you needed an urgent, you know, pop to the loo kind of thing. But again, it was great fun, and we had a good time there, despite our what looks like fairly limited accommodation. As I say, they have upgraded all of their accommodation now, both in Fatapeli and in Zographou. So day one of path clearing begins with waking up at about 3:30 in the morning to the sound of these two things. What the item on the left is the talenton, which is a sort of wooden plank that's hit with a wooden mallet. And that's a sort of a gentle alarm call, which goes off about 3:30 in the morning. As we head towards 4 a.m., they have these metal hammers hitting on this metal bar, which is curved, which it's almost impossible to sleep through. And so that's the sort of call to prayer, as it were, for people coming to the morning service at 4 a.m. Now, the thing is that the path clearers have a blessing not to have to go, unless they want to go, to those early services, because we need to leave fairly quickly and before the end of those services. So the first thing that the path clearers enjoy is trying to find where breakfast is, and they're in the trapeza. Now, because most of the monks are still in the service, we tend to have our breakfast with the workers, so people who are working on the construction or drivers or so on. And this is an example of the Zographou trapeza, where we have our breakfast along the left-hand side there. You can see things are set out, and a fine steaming cauldron of mint tea, which sets you up for the day. Again, two contrasting trapezes there. The previous one, the first one was very well frescoed, beautiful, and the other one just a different style, a different era, sort of 18th, 17th century, I think that is. So again, the decoration in the churches, in the Catholicon, is absolutely fabulous. Even though we aren't able to go there in the morning, we are encouraged to go there for Vespers in the afternoon once we've finished work. So I just put up two of these slides. It's the same monastery and the same people who frescoed it at Simonos Petras. We have to have our bags, our waters, our tools, and everything ready as soon as we finish breakfast to head out. So everything kind of needs to be organized. So this is what we're missing out on whilst that's happening. So whilst we're getting busy getting ourselves oriented, as it were, and used to our new surroundings, at Zographou we find this wonderful signpost, which I really love. It has directions to most of the monasteries on the Holy Mountain, or a good selection of them. But then for folk who might be homesick, you can see here there is a signpost to Sofia, which is 459 kilometers away, and a signpost to Varna on the Black Sea coast, which is 975 kilometers away. So I guess that's reassuring, I think, for some people, but it doesn't really necessarily help to find your way on the first couple of days. On our first day here, we had a really brilliant stroke of luck on two strokes of luck. One is we found a friendly driver who said he would take us up to the ridge, which was a great help because it saves a lot of time. The second is that we happened to befriend or meet or have a chat with one of the local policemen the night before. And he basically had said he would come to help us on one of our path clearing days. So he came with us, and he was absolutely brilliant. To have an extra pair of hands was fantastic, and to get a lift saved us a lot of time walking. It's not that usual that you get a lift, but it was great to have it. So this is Mr. Thomas, path clearing leader for the week, crouching. This is a very typical scene on a path that's that does need clearing. There's a rule of thumb, and I'm afraid I don't know where it's come from, that the clearance for the path needs to be the size of a large monk wearing his hat sat on a mule. So we've worked that out as to what the precise dimensions of that are now, and we get to within millimeters, I'm sure, every time. It's a very obvious kind of rule of thumb rather than anything more scientific. Here's another little blockage, and again, it's something that needs more than one person to deal with. So the people in the team all drop their bags and collectively move the obstacle. there we are. The job done for that particular time. And obviously we had a photographer on hand to take the picture. This is a similar sort of thing, but just to give you another example of a sort of jungle type environment where you look at it and you think, how on earth are we going to get through this? This is at Lavra. It was a different team, but I just thought that was an impressive thing that they needed to confront. This is the aftershot where the Calderimi is exposed. You can definitely, I'm sure, get a monk on a mule a certain way down there. And what is coming up is the reward of this, which is stopping for lunch. So in one or two cases, we thought we needed to be a bit clever about our lunch, because if you leave it lying around, although they mostly come out at night, our little friends, the jackals, will come along and tear it to shreds and eat it. So we found that hanging it up a tree was quite a neat way of avoiding them from joining us for lunch. This was the Lavra group enjoying their lunch and having a well-earned rest at a nice little spring, which is a short little car ride away from Lavra. One of the colleagues who was on that team told me about one of the dishes that they had for lunch. I hope this isn't too shocking for anybody, but he called it sardines Lavra. I have never ever experienced a meal like this, and I don't know anybody else who has, but this was a mixture of things. Foolishly, I asked him if he had a recipe for it, tongue-in-cheek, and he sent me this wonderful thing, which is, if you want to create this at home, this is how you do it. I would advise against making this at home. I think I'd just say here that it was a sort of very tongue-in-cheek thing. This is the gentleman who came up with that recipe, Jim Olivier from Vermont, and this was the Vatopedi team having an alternative lunch, a very much more typical Athonite lunch. A big team here because there's a lot of footpaths, and we tend to have tomato, cucumber, feta sometimes, and maybe some spring onions, and a sort of, you can just see down here, a plastic pot of tinned sweet fruit, which is really nice, but it's extraordinarily difficult to open the plastic top without getting syrup all over your clothes and creeping things bothering you. But it was very pleasant. And at the end of the day, this is a very good photo of a very typical response. Shall I or shan't I go for a shower now? I think that's really quite a classic moment of somebody who's done a very, very good hard day's work. Occasionally we can't go path clearing because either it's a feast day or the weather is beyond awful. But here is a few examples of what we are sometimes given to do. This is Chris and Peter Howarth from New Zealand, a wonderful map person extraordinaire, cleaning fish, which was quite a challenge, but I think they did a great job. Back in Zografu, we were invited by the police to spend an evening with them, and we had a very cordial evening with them. But I wonder if anybody who's watching this can see the sort of surprise element to the culinary fare that was put before us. The answer, of course, is meatballs. Athos, there isn't meat taken on Athos at all, and so we were rather surprised when we saw this. But in the next slide, we'll see another view of it. We all sat back, but I think by the end of the evening, there weren't any meatballs left at all. We had a very, very nice time with them, and we took this photograph outside, which made it into the Friends of Mount Athos annual report. This gentleman here had previously been he used to deliver mail on a mule, and he was 90 years old. And these are our fellow police friends up here, and we had a really, really good time with them. Made very good relations with them, and it was a good time. On another day, I think this was appropriately the Feast of the Ascension, and a monk, this is in one of the southwestern monasteries, decided that we should go upwards and ascend. So we went on a fabulous walk right up to a cell called St. Onufrios's, where he was quite keen for us to tidy up a little garden that he was looking at a slightly tumbled down cell up there. So we occasionally got a chance to pause for the view, which, as you can see, was absolutely stunning. You can see little ferries plying along the southwest coast here. This little chapel is called Panagia, and after we'd done a little bit of work around it, I do remember that we were asked by the monk to sing the Paschal Troparion, which we somehow managed to do in Slavonic and in Greek at that time. It probably sounded not that great, but luckily there was nobody around for miles. Back inland, this is the monastery of Constamonitu, which for anybody who's ever read the Asterix stories, often is considered as the village that held out against the Romans. It is a very traditional monastery, and this particular monk he gave me a tour a couple of times. One to have a look at the view, and the other he was going to teach me how to do some bell ringing, but more on that in a minute. Constamonitu is again, as I say, very traditional. Number of things. First of all, it doesn't have any electric lighting or heating in any of the corridors or bedrooms or in the trapeza or in the church. Everything is lit by oil lamps, which is fabulous. It's really evocative and very special, and the atmosphere reflects that. The other thing they don't have an awful lot of is, or at least publicly, is electricity. So sometimes if you go there with team members who are slightly younger, there's a bit of a panic when mobile phones can't be charged up. But as luck would have it, our friend here showed us a place where you could actually plug your phone in. It was in some wood store, the most unlikely of places, but we felt very privileged. And much as other people wanted us to say, how do we get our phones charged up? He did swear us to secrecy, and we thought, well, we ought to respect that. But it is a very beautiful monastery in other ways. This was my guide's attempt to show me how to do a bit of bell ringing. Unfortunately, he didn't give me a pair of ear defenders, so it was absolutely deafening. The other thing he does is he patches and do's and mend, as it were, with rasophors, because they weren't the richest of monasteries, and so they like to do things in their own particular way. And I think people respect them immensely for the way that they do that. One other day that we had, and again at Ascension Day, I think it was the year before, Chris here, Bart Janssens, the legendary coffee maker and extraordinaire Belgian, and myself went for a walk from Lavra, and we found ourselves at this cell which is built by and inhabited by the rather remarkable Father Joseph, who's here. It took him about 20 years, I think, to build it. He's got the Athonite flag flowing up here, which apparently sometimes he waves at passing jets. We've got the Holy Mountain in the background up here, and it really is a remarkable place. He was extremely hospitable, and we had a fabulous afternoon with him. This is a sort of panoramic shot from the Skeet of St. Minas, and it was told to me that when a different group of people arrived there, one of them said to Father Joseph, do you realize, he was from America, he said, do you realize you have the best view in Europe? And I think it's not bad as a 180-degree panorama. Thanks very much, Chris. I think you're going to take over this little bit, aren't you?
Sorry, I was saying thank you to Peter there whilst being mute, rather appropriate. But no, thank you, Peter, very much. Appreciate that. I rather think the footpaths of the Holy Mountain are in good shape with you in charge, hopefully for the next few years. And thank you for letting me tell the wine story, because this is such a lovely story. It starts with a request from Clarence House and the office of His Royal Highness for a team staying at a particular monastery to help with a diplomatic incident, a minor diplomatic incident. And the whole thing started in 2004 when His Royal Highness visited the Holy Mountain, and he visited this particular monastery. And at the time they were planting their first vineyard. And the abbot had said to Prince Charles that when we make our first proper quality wine, we would very much like you to try it. And of course, Prince Charles, being British, said, of course, I'd love to. Anyway, roll on 18 years, and Prince Charles receives a letter from this monastery suggesting that they would like to send him 2,000 litres of their first vintage. And our job, and we did choose to accept the mission, our job was to try and dissuade that much wine being sent to the UK from Mount Athos. It wasn't practical, of course. It was an absolutely beautiful and generous idea. But anyway, we were given this mission, and obviously reluctantly we took it on board. And one of the things that we said to ourselves is that we're going to do this really well, and doing it well meant that we had to get to know our hosts, we had to get to know what they were thinking, and of course we really needed to understand the wine, which is why we spent a little bit of time down in the cellar. And our strategy evolved, obviously, during the course of the week as we started to understand the mentality of our hosts. By the way, our hosts referred to Prince Charles as the king, believing that he is the real king, and never mind his mother. So they said, look, the king must have this wine, and we had a small challenge to overcome. But as the week evolved, we set on a strategy, which was that we could perhaps take some wine back with us in our luggage, not very much, but that would be enough to fulfill the promise that the abbot had made 18 years earlier. And during the course of the week, the idea kind of took hold, and we even helped in the bottling process, and we managed to take 8 bottles with us. There were 4 of us, each of us took 2 bottles, and the story ended at Clarence House with the Prince's private secretary and 3 of the group that were able to make it that day. So it's one of, I love wine stories because you can slightly exaggerate a bit more each time you tell them, but pretty much everything I told you there was truthful, I promise. I had given a little bit of thought as to whether to introduce a moment of negativity in the presentation, and I kind of concluded I must. I wanted to show you this because it's almost a crying shame that so much beauty, so much holiness, we find scenes like this. And this is a picture from a couple of years ago, about a mile away from the beautiful monastery of Vatopedi. And there are 2 reasons why pollution like this is particularly bad on the northern side of the peninsula. As Peter said earlier on, the prevailing winds mean that a whole bunch of rubbish is drawn in. And of course, that's compounded by the fact that there isn't really an incentive for anybody to move it, because there is no tourism, because there are no hotels, there are no villas, there are no private dwellings. Whilst the monasteries do interact with the sea and they do fish, they tend to stay very close to the monastery, and they tend therefore not to have either an incentive or in fact the time to go clearing these beaches. In preparing for this talk, I had the great pleasure to connect with Mrs. Lazu, the chairman of the Lascaridis Foundation, and she mentioned to me something called the Typhoon Project, something that I now know a lot about. But the Typhoon Project is something that they are that works 365 days a year to clear the coastline of Greece, all of the coastline of all of Greece. And of course, that's going to be a never-ending job. Greece has the 13th longest coastline of any country, which is remarkable for quite a small country. But in any event, during the last summer, the Typhoon Project passed through Mount Athos, and I think spent rather a longer time there than they'd anticipated, and took away rather more rubbish than I think they thought would be in such a pristine place. Of course, it is a pristine place. The south coast is dramatically better, but the north coast is going to need work forevermore. But I'm really, really delighted that somebody's doing that work, and I'm looking forward to seeing this beach on our next visit in May and reporting back on hopefully that it's much better, of course, but how quickly, I want to know how quickly it gets back to its awful state, and to see whether there's anything else we can do to make it better. It's an ongoing battle what we do, because occasionally we come over a ridge and we see something like this, and it's just heartbreaking really that somebody has decided to take away our path and replace it with what occasionally appears to be a random piece of road that doesn't particularly go anywhere. So both on the coast and with respect to the paths, it's not a job that's ever going to stop, and obviously we don't intend to stop anytime soon. We are constantly trying to discourage this kind of distraction, because it's a genuine crying shame. We want Mount Athos to look like this, which is a much more typical and much more beautiful view. If you'd indulge me, I'd like to say thank you to a few people who have helped to do to get us to where we are. I've already said thank you to His Royal Highness and John Arnell. I wanted to thank people like Andrew Buchanan, Michael Naldrett, David Stoddard, David Johnson, Leslie Curry, and Rob Carr-Archer. All those people have led missions over the last 18 years. And then people like Dimitris Bakalis, David Bain, Peter Howarth, and Graham Speak have been tremendous components of what we do for a variety of reasons. I wanted to thank them. I also want to thank a whole range of people on the mountain. We have a convention not to name monks. This particular gentleman has probably done more for the footpaths and more for the Friends of Mount Athos than any other on the Holy Mountain, and he knows who he is. He's a wonderful, saintly gentleman that we are really privileged to know. I want to just take a couple of moments in concluding to tell you about some special moments that kind of stayed with me. This photograph is one that brings back such a beautiful memory of sitting by the pristine south side, on the pristine south side of the mountain, at the Arsenas of Konstamonitou, the Asterix monastery, and just I heard a little tut-tut, and I looked up and I saw a tiny, tiny little boat, and that's a monk in the smallest boat that I've ever seen fishing. And this picture just makes you feel like you're somewhere other than the world, and I absolutely love it. The other thing I love about the Holy Mountain is that you almost always are there with people that are better than you, cleverer than you, smarter than you, more knowledgeable than you. And these two gentlemen, of course, are all of those things. I love the gesture from Peter there, because it says academic. It says smarter than you. So I had a week with these two guys, and I literally didn't understand anything they said for virtually all of the time, but I enjoyed it nonetheless. However, as this next photo will show, is that I can do hand gestures, flashy hand gestures as well. But this is I love this photograph because it's a wonderful moment of friends having just finished lunch in a wonderful place called Hera, and we are planning what we're going to do that afternoon. And it's a beautiful photograph because it allowed me to use my my newfound hand gesture, which I'm very proud of, as you can see. I want to say to you that if you can visit the Holy Mountain, you should do so. We, of course, highly recommend our footpaths and our path descriptions. If you wanted to join the path clearing team, you are most welcome to apply. We have a Q&A on February the 21st at 6 p.m, at which time you may ask us questions or inquire as to how easy or hard it is to do. And of course, I realize that a significant percentage of our listeners this evening probably won't ever be able to go to the Holy Mountain. And what I would say to you is, please, can you take an interest in the Holy Mountain from afar if you can? It definitely needs you, and one day you might need it. It really is a super special place. And of course, you're wondering why I've had this on the screen for the last couple of minutes. It is an advertisement. Peter and I have been asked to keep this talk to 50 minutes, which I think we've managed. If you want to hear 50 hours, which is what we really would have preferred, then please buy this book. It's available on Amazon. Both Peter and myself had the pleasure to contribute to it. It's available on Amazon, but if you wanted a much better price than that, drop me a line, and I think I may have 20 or so copies still left from my sort of co-authors stash. Thank you for listening to us. It's been a real pleasure. Over to you, John.
Fantastic. Thank you, Chris, and thank you, Peter. If you close down the screen share, Chris, then we should appear to everyone in full gallery view like that. Very good. Because, as I said at the start, you have very kindly agreed to answer questions. Some I have, and some coming in from the audience. Please keep posing them. I think we have about 15 minutes for Q&A. First, let me just say what a fantastic ray of sunshine your pictures were, and your descriptions have been for the last 50 minutes or so. This has been a typically grey and gloomy winter here, so to see Athos in all of its sunny splendour is really cheering. And you've given us a tremendous, very real insight into the work that the path clearers have been doing over the last 20 years or so. Can you tell us a little bit about the path clearers themselves? Do you have to be believers? Is this something for those curious about the faith, about spirituality? Is it only for the Orthodox? What's the situation with the path clearers themselves?
Shall I take that, Chris?
Go for it.
No, it doesn't have to be just for Orthodox. In fact, there are usually quite a number who aren't Orthodox. What we tend to go for, and Chris will probably elaborate on this, is a mixture of people with different skills. Each team needs to have certain types of experience in it. For example, we look for a certain number of people who are Orthodox. We need a certain number of first aiders, because each team has to have a first aider. There's a first aid pack to carry, because you're out on the trail, you're a long way from anywhere, and you need somebody who can attend if there's a problem. Even though we've got hand tools, some of them are potentially nasty. also Greek speakers, as well as a mixture of novices and experienced folk. What we do try to do, though, is at least get to the evening service if we can, so that there is an opportunity to see the sort of glory of these, immense buildings and the decoration, and just to hear the singing and the chanting and the incense, the smell of the incense, and the whole thing creates its own atmosphere. And even for people who have no faith or have a different faith, it's also not about converting people. It's just allowing people to absorb that experience as part of the overall footpath experience. That's how I see it anyway. I'm not sure if Chris, if you see it the same. Or
yeah, I mean, I think in answer to the question, no, you don't have to be Orthodox. And I would say, on balance, in my experience, and by the way, I made an error, which has been pointed out to me. The first mission was in 2001, not in 2004. Apologies for that. But no, the answer is, I think on balance, fewer of our participants are Orthodox than are Orthodox. So more non-Orthodox than Orthodox. So of course you have to have a curiosity and an interest in the religion, but everyone does. Otherwise, why would they go?
Yeah, and there are a number of pictures that you've shown us with gerontes, with monks in skites, in the monasteries. Are you able to spend a good deal of time with them? I know you're busy path clearing for most of the time, but do you get the chance to talk to the monks about their lives, to understand and gain some insight into their spirituality and their patterns of life?
I would say when we talk about the footpaths, we mean monks, because that's really what is the truly special thing about our extended time in a monastery, is we get to talk to the monks. And yes, to answer your question, yes, and it is possibly the bigger privilege than actually clearing the footpaths. It's just that our real reason for being there is the footpaths, but once we are there and our faces become familiar, people share with us in a way that they would not do if you were visiting a monastery for one evening or 2 evenings. So absolutely, it's an amazing experience, and one we can't really share too much because by its very nature, but it is essentially it's an essential part of the experience.
Just to add to that, John, if I may, we often send a reasonable number of new people for the first time visitors, first time path clearers to Vatopedi, partly because it's a very big place. But it's also got a lot of monks, about 120 or so, of all sorts of ages and nationalities. But they really do make time to talk to you, and they get to know you, and they remember your names, and it's really moving. They'll take you and show you aspects of the monastery, like the treasury or other things which aren't always on the sort of the sort of obvious pilgrim route. So you do feel that you can actually speak to people. If they realize you are Orthodox, of course, they're keen to chat to you about other things. If they know that you're not Orthodox, then they might be keen to talk to you about becoming Orthodox. But it's always in a sort of, reasonably, it's entirely well made and often, quite good humored and so on. So not threatening in any way, shape or form, I would say.
Thank you. I'm going to come on to some questions from the audience now. I do have one or two others which I will remember to get back to, but we're getting a good number of questions in. I'm going to take them in what may appear to the audience to be a slightly random order, but there is some logic to it. So M.A. Johnson asks a personal question of the two of you. How did you both get involved in the project, and how did you first take an interest and get to the Holy Mountain?
Go on, Peter.
I go first. I came across the Friends of Mount Athos when I was on the Holy Mountain for the first time. Actually, I was at Vatopedi, and the friend who I was with came up to me and said, "I've just met these English guys, and they're going to meet us after Vespers, and we're going to have a chat about them." And we did, and it was David Stothard and 3 other guys who were the footpath clearing team for Vatapedi. So we had a chat with them, and they said, oh, where are you going next? We said, we'd like to go X, Y, and Z tomorrow. And within 30 seconds, David had given me the footpath descriptions to get from A to B to C and all the way back to A again. And so we did that, and I thought, this is interesting. And so that was my first encounter with the footpath clearing team. And so I went along to the AGM the following year in Oxford, and I met Andrew Buchanan, and the rest is history, kind of thing.
And Chris?
Yeah, mine is a tale of the times, really. I got involved in the footpaths because I always say because it was Prince Charles's idea, which is a horrible lie, but I'll explain the story. I went to an event at Highgrove, and I had a couple of glasses of wine, rather more than I would have liked, and I realized that the Prince was saying hello to everybody there, and I said to the person I was with, my ex-wife actually, Louise, I said, I really don't want to say hello. I don't feel capable of saying hello to a prince. I'm a little bit tipsy. Can we just sort of shuffle a little bit out of the way? And we tried, but we failed. And eventually we were greeted by the prince, and he said to me as he shook my hand, "Are you one of the path warriors?" And not knowing what a path warrior was, I said yes, because I didn't want to disappoint. And as soon as he moved on, I asked the nearest person to me, "What's a path warrior?" And it was explained to me, and I felt, having lied to royalty, I needed to do something about it. So that's how it was his idea.
Very good. Right, I'm going to go on to a series of questions which are stacking up about the path clearing itself, which is, of course, the purpose of the talk. I'll start with a comment and then a question by Eleni Palazidu. She says, thank you for a very interesting chat. Delighted to see pictures of Ionoros. This is a woman I can't visit. My question is, are you clearing existing pathways that the monks had originally created, or creating new paths? And what's the purpose? To make it easier for the monks to commute, or for visitors?
Right, I'll do that question quite quick answer. We don't create new paths really, unless a road has stolen an old path, in which case we have to find a new way. So we are essentially repairing ancient paths that have been there for hundreds of years. The reason we do it is because we want to encourage the monks to use them, but of course the monks tend to stay within their own environment. They very rarely go to another monastery. Occasionally they do. What we want to do is encourage pilgrims to walk, rather than encourage more buses and more coaches and more trucks and therefore more roads. So that's the real reason we do it. And we do feel we have an effect, because we know how many people use our footpath descriptions and so on.
Great. M.A. Johnson asks a follow-on question. You mentioned the space that you're trying to create as you clear the paths. M.A. Johnson says, are mules still used for travel between the monasteries? I've seen photos from the 1970s.
The only times I've come into contact with them at Simonos Petros. When you get off at the Arsenas there, it's a really stiff walk up to the monastery itself, and they have some mules. So monasteries do have them, but not every monastery, I think, would probably be correct, Chris.
Between Dionysiou and Grigorio, for example, there is a mule train that we bump into often. There is also the fantastic story, I can't name the monastery, but there's the fantastic story told to us by the old policeman, where one of the monasteries registered a mule as a vehicle for tax purposes, and it actually had its own number plate. And what was remarkable about this mule is he lived for about 75 years, because of course it wasn't the same mule. But anyway, so yes, the answer is they are rarer than they were, but there are mules on the Holy Mountain still used to ferry things.
They also have
to see sometimes.
Yeah.
To see.
The other place they have them is halfway up the Holy Mountain. And so to get up the last bit, is it from Panagia or to Panagia? There's a stretch of the mountain where you can actually, it's a commercial thing though, it's sort of 50 euros, and you can sit on a mule and they'll take you quite a long way up the mountain. But that, I think, is separate from the monasteries themselves.
Right. In terms of the extent of the path clearing, David Royal asks, have you cleared paths around the skytes, the smaller monastic dependencies? He says that he remembers from 1971 to 2 a skyte called Kafsokalivia, he thinks, on the southern tip of Athos, where the small number of monks specialized in icon painting and were very happy to sell these abroad. So are you clearing paths for the benefit of those in the dependencies as well as the 20 main monasteries?
Yes, I mean, we don't really distinguish between them. We'll clear any path that we're asked to clear, frankly. We tend to stick to the more widely used routes, but no, a lot of our work is around. I love it when a monk says, "I'm struggling to shift my olives from the grove. Could you help me, please, by clearing that path there?" So we're often in conversation. We have our own plans, but our plans are always adjusted to fit the requirements of the occupants of the Holy Mountain. In a sense, as I say, we want to encourage them not to buy a truck. So if we can help them to move their stuff by clearing a footpath, then of course we'll do that.
Yeah.
Sometimes, John, it's difficult and to break into monasteries that haven't hosted you before, and occasionally we try to do that, and gradually there's little bits of success. Where it helps enormously in one particular case is in Panteleimonos, the big Russian monastery, and the little skeet, well, not so little skeet, but a nice skeet of Bogorodica. And a couple of times we've had really excellent Russian speakers, and the difference it has made, I think, in going there and being able to present our bona fides, if you like, has been quite significant. And we don't clear the paths at Panteleimonos, but we've had some measure of success, you know, in their hospitality and also around Bogorodica.
Yeah. A follow-up question from M.A. Johnson, good question. How many pilgrims, do you know how many pilgrims on average in normal times before COVID are using the footpaths? Do you have any sense of their use?
I'm afraid we don't have a real sense of their use. I mean, we know how many people download the descriptions, and obviously we talk to the monasteries and ask them about usage, and we also witness our own, you know, the traffic when we're there ourselves. But we don't know, to be really honest with you. But we're really not in the business of science. We're in the business of kind of keep everything open and keep talking about the footpaths and make the descriptions as accessible as possible, and hopefully we will encourage. I think some cultures, and it might even be true of the Greek culture, that walking isn't instinctively part of the culture. So people would not instinctively choose to walk. They'd say, why would you walk if you can get on a truck? So it's I'm sorry if I've insulted half the people on this call, but seriously, I think that our job is to try and get people to imagine that a trip to the Holy Mountain, whilst you can't avoid motorized transport, the walking between monasteries is not just something that we would like you to do, it's also something so beautiful, because you experience the landscape so differently than if you're in a truck or in a bus.
I agree entirely, and when I was British ambassador, I insisted on walking as a pilgrim with my staff, with my security, somewhat unwilling, but I was told he was a volunteer, and there seemed to be a lot of surprise that an episimos, a VIP, would actually walk, but it's the way to do it. And I was grateful for your signs and for the clarity of the paths that I used, particularly on the days when the rain drenched me and I was kind of groping along. Sir Michael Llewellyn-Smith, another former British ambassador, says, great talk, thank you. Further to the previous question about the usage of the paths, how much does increasing mechanization, trucks, etc., on the mountain affect the usage of the paths?
Inevitably, the paths are not as well used as they were 50 years ago. I don't think we can deny that. I don't think we are going to stop mechanization and the building of roads. But what our job is to encourage anybody that will listen to us to do things in a more sympathetic way, and therefore, as I say, if we help by clearing paths, then that's what I think we're doing. I don't think we're preventing mechanization, but you will see that some monasteries on the Holy Mountain have taken a much more sympathetic view to energy creation and transport. And I think we've had a tiny little bit to do with that. So mechanization, unfortunately, however, is going to happen. It absolutely will.
I wonder whether just one other small thing, no, big thing rather, was the impact of COVID has had on the numbers of pilgrims. I mean, up until that point, monasteries were tending to accept as many pilgrims as they could possibly accommodate, especially the larger monasteries. So having the means to transport them around was a major factor. And since the COVID struck, we were there in 2020 in September, and there was virtually nobody there. There was only 8 of us, and we did some work, but it was palpable, the difference that it made, you know. And I just wonder whether some of the larger monasteries that full on were all the time doing bed changes and turnovers, changeovers for pilgrims might, you know, take a step back and just think or look at it slightly differently in the future. That's not to say they're going to stop building roads, but I just wonder whether it will make a little bit of a difference to how we think about what pilgrimage is.
Yeah. There's a question here from David Pert. How many volunteers are able to participate in your path clearing program every year?
So we don't have a fixed number. We generally speaking try to keep the group manageable, and therefore we tend to be around about the 30 mark in any given year. The other limitation is the accommodation that we're able to request, because obviously we are asking for accommodation for 30 people for 2 weeks, typically 4 or 5 people in each monastery for a whole week, and that tends to limit how much we can do, how many people we can take. I don't think we would want to have 50 people, it would just be too big, but 30 is the optimum number. And this year we've got a slightly higher demand than normal because of the last couple of years people have not been able to visit, or at least in the full size group. So this year I think we will maybe push it to 32 or 34, but that's the kind of size of group.
Yeah, okay. And another good question, very practical question from John FRGS. What's the weather usually like when you go to work?
So the last 2 years we've shifted the trip to September because May has not been possible. Each time we thought, look, let's give it a little bit more time. So we did manage to get there in September 2020 and September 2021. And we're making a reconnaissance trip in May, but we're going as a full group in September. The answer to the question is the weather is warm, but not stifling. There are occasional days of rain. And I personally have got a bit of a soft spot for September because the harvest, the olives, the grapes, it's somehow a richer time of year. But of course, May is beautiful for completely different reasons. But the weather is tolerable. We wouldn't go in the middle of July because that would not be. We did go in the middle of July for a different trip last year, and it was not easy. That's for sure.
There was only 4 of us.
Yeah, I bet.
At the start, and none of us at the end.
Yeah.
Great. I want to take a couple of environmental questions, and then we'll start to wrap up as time is pressing. So Martin Nesbitt says, does the relatively untouched nature of the landscape mean that it's a haven for endangered species?
and without being specialists, I would say buy my book, because there is a section on the animals of the Holy Mountain. But yes, the answer is there is a beautiful book, for example, on the snakes of the Holy Mountain, written by a very distinguished Serb herpetologist. So that the wildlife of the Holy Mountain is very special, and of course the landscape is affected by a whole bunch of things. It's not just there are no female animals, there are no sheep, there are no cows, there's no grazing, and that tends to have an effect on what happens to the landscape. So yes, I think without being an expert, certainly from my own experience and from having co-authored the book on Holy Mountain, I think that it's absolutely a paradise of species that you would struggle to find elsewhere in Greece. Yeah. So yes.
Final question from the audience. Chris Deliso says, any chance of the Friends joining in with Project Typhoon, or else supplementing it in seasons when that project doesn't go to Athos? Sorry, Peter, I have to answer this one as well.
No, I was hoping you would, because there's some relevant information that you have.
Well, it's really funny. Last year, before we knew about the Typhoon project, we had put together a scheme to provide funds to any Greek school or scout group that wanted to take a bunch of young lads to the Holy Mountain to clear the beaches. And of course, what we were doing was nowhere in the same league as the Typhoon project, but we didn't quite get it off the ground. We had too many other things going on, and the virus didn't allow us to progress things as we would have liked. So I would absolutely love to find a way of supplementing what the Typhoon project does, because of course they've got the whole of Greece to worry about, and I fear that it will be a few years until they can next get back to Mount Athos. And I don't know this for sure, but I suspect that may be too long, and therefore we might have to find some way. But yes, we would love to do something now that we know that the infrastructure is there and the precedent is there. You know, this is collaborative. We're all trying to do the same thing. So if we can, we will. It's definitely on the agenda, but we have quite a lot on our hands, and you know, it's hard to promise, but I would absolutely love to make it happen.
Two very quick questions, final questions, which I'll just put together. What sort of number of monks speak English? Are you able to speak English to many? And secondly, what sort of reception do Roman Catholics get on the Holy Mountain? Do you take Roman Catholics with you, for example, on the path clearing?
We do indeed. And once they are happy to confirm that they have nothing to do with Catalan pirates from the 14th century, the monks are absolutely wonderful with them. Roman Catholics, Protestants, all sorts of people go there and are completely welcomed. Occasionally there are questions that the monks ask, and naturally they would like everybody to be Orthodox, but they're very comfortable with having conversations with people from different denominations, or even who aren't Christian. So on that, I forgot. Sorry, forgive me.
The English question was, in every monastery there is somebody that will speak a little bit of English. Yeah. In many of the larger monasteries, there's a large contingent of Australians. The monk that I showed a picture of earlier on with me, he's from America. Canadians, there's a large contingent of Cypriots. They're slightly overrepresented on the Holy Mountain, and they tend to speak good English. So yeah, English is relatively widely spoken. I think you would struggle to land somewhere when nobody spoke English.
Strangely, Finnish monks seem to speak better English than most people I know.
Finnish monks speak excellent English indeed. Correct.
Very good. You certainly meet monks of all nationality and I think all language types, really. So I think rare, even the monolingual Englishman finds monks to talk to, certainly at the monasteries and skitas that I've been to. Okay, I think we will wrap up at that point. Let me thank you, Chris and Peter, for what's been a fantastic, colourful and really insightful talk. It's been fantastic that you've shared your experiences so generously with us all. I think it's given all of the audience not only some great images, some great photographs to look after, but real insights, not only into the work that you do, but also the actual lives of the monks on the Holy Mountain itself, which is, of course, the whole reason drawing pilgrims to the mountain itself. So thank you very much for doing this event for us with the League. It's been tremendous to be able to do a joint League and Friends event together. Let me thank what has been a very large audience. We've had over 110, 115 people throughout the session. I would like to remind the audience on behalf of both the League and the Friends that we are membership organizations. We both welcome and encourage new members. In the registration process, a number of you asked us to send you information about membership or to put you on our respective mailing lists. This list of volunteers will be shared with the Friends over the next 2 days or so, and we will get back to everyone who has asked to be sent membership information. But if you were shy at that moment, but now know as a result of this brilliant talk that you would like to join either the Friends or the League, please contact us at the email addresses given on the screen now. You can also find the programs of both charities by clicking on the websites that are set out for you here as well. We really do put on these events to create communities of friends and of interested people in our cultural work, spiritual and environmental, as it has been in this particular talk as well. So with final thanks to Chris and Peter, who I think should also have the opportunity to say farewell to everyone.
Thank you, everyone. It's been a pleasure.
Absolutely. Many thanks.
So
thank you, John.
Thank you very much, guys. And please do follow us again in the future. I hope very much that you've enjoyed this. Our programs are up on the website. Please do join us at our next events, whether as webinars or as we all hope to be doing live events. Good evening to all of you. Thank you.
Thank you.